Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone from around the world. Thanks for coming in today on this fine Tuesday. It is the Workspot webinar, the monthly recurring webinar, and we have some great content for you. So as you can see from the agenda, we're here to talk to you about reducing VDI costs by 80% with a platform that unifies Enterprise Browser, DaaS, and DEX. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. How do we keep the CFO happy by saving money and yet keep the users happy at the same time? And this will be brought to you by myself, Brad Peterson, coming in as the field CTO from California, and Bill Tompkins. Hello, Bill.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Bill Tompkins, as you can see, our system architect, and he's coming in from the East Coast area. So we are coast to coast live with you today, Tuesday, July 29th. All right, let's kick into the agenda. Now, the agenda is as follows. We're going to talk a little bit about the current state of the EUC market and the challenges that are out there, and then go straight into the Workspot purpose-built platform. Go into details on that, and you're going to see live demonstrations coming up also, okay? All right, so let's just jump right in. We know you guys are having challenges out there in the EUC space. The primary hypervisor vendors and VDI vendors of yesteryear are kind of challenging the world today with pricing and contracts and many other things as well. The folks are looking for alternative, and oftentimes those are the people that actually come to us. And so we want to be the ones that can certainly help them in that endeavor. Now, this is what we're finding. The challenges out there is in the stack that I just mentioned a moment ago. You know, all the way through the hardware stack, especially obviously when you're doing this on-prem, you get the networking, storage, and the servers that you've built out and the hypervisors that you put on them, like Broadcom. Very challenging to a lot of folks right now. Now, did you go with the Citrix or Horizon stack on top of that for VDI delivery? You know, and then NetScalers and other equipment that's expensive and you're using on-prem. And then even doing DEX and even endpoints like the thin clients. There's a whole stack of hardware and software that's required to pull this off, to take application and desktops and deliver those to your users, and it's getting more and more challenging. The pricing on all this is going through the roof. It's kind of crazy, and the relationships you're having with these vendors is getting very challenging. All right, so how do we see this, right? We see this as, replacing VDI in many cases on-prem, and there's a ton of reasons why it makes sense to take this really into the cloud. You know, you can see the challenges here with you have your on-prem VDIs we talked about. Now, you can take a look at DaaS, so desktop as a service, and providing these applications of desktop out of the cloud. You're going to find out why today we're going to simplify this and give you a ton of cost savings along the way. And that is the FinOps element of this, so financial operations, making sure you're taking a look at your VMs that are in the cloud and you're avoiding urban sprawl. You don't want that VM sprawl all over the place and getting surprised at the end of the month. Also, DEX, digital employee experience. You want to make sure that your end users are happy and you're not getting surprises and finding out even at the end of the month that they have been unhappy for a long time. Now, there's a whole new dimension that we're going to talk about today, which is the enterprise browser. So the enterprise browser is the ability baked into the Workspot client to have a secured browser experience for your web applications. So you don't even need any cloud infrastructure for that. And then combining this with an AI and a machine learning element that makes this all super intelligent, and it optimizes it for performance, for security, and for cost. So when you take all this and combine it together, you really end up with the Workspot Cloud Workplace. All right, now look at how this is all combined together. AI is really feathered in across the board, and it's supporting the notion of optimizing cost as well as the end user experience and security, as we talked about a moment ago, and then building all this on top of those two delivery mechanisms, DaaS, of course, for Windows app, and Linux and Windows desktop virtualization, as well as the enterprise browser. All right, now it makes tons of sense because typically what we find when we talk to our customers is there's these primary applications they use all day long. So they're using things like Outlook, OneDrive, Teams. Obviously they're doing their email, they're accessing their files, and they're connecting and collaborating and doing video share and so on. And so those applications are all just not only Windows native apps, but they're also browser-based applications. And so you don't even need a desktop. But when you do need a desktop, you can launch a desktop and you can grab that. You might have to do some more intensive or integrated work, or maybe some GPU accelerated application work. All that's good. Now, what have we done within the Workspot client? As I mentioned a moment ago, well, within the client, we have created this enterprise browser. So it's a Chromium browser package built into the client. So when you do click an icon to do a web application, it's going to use that Chromium package inside. It's going to give you a local experience, not an experience of a browser that's published to you over the network, but a local experience in the browser, no cloud cost, infrastructure cost required, and the CFO loves it, the end user loves it too. On occasion, you will need a virtual app or maybe a virtual desktop, the whole desktop. But the good news is you only need it once in a while. And when you do, you pay hourly or per use. Now the overall cost of your entire VDI deployment changes dramatically. You don't have this entire cost on-prem where you're paying to be, all your capacity that you might have at peak load, and you're never really at peak load, but instead you're actually farming this over to browser experiences and then just on demand as you go, as we call it, just in time and just enough provisioning in the cloud to drop all your costs. CFOs, our customers' CFOs love this, and the end users are very happy for many reasons that we're going to talk about coming up. Now, one thing I want to do is show you this little 60-second demo that kind of ties all that together. Let's take a look. Let's launch the Workspot client. User authentication happens through the identity provider, and everything runs inside a secure policy-controlled container. We'll start by opening Outlook to check email. Now we're in OneDrive, opening a sales presentation with just one click. Next, let's launch Teams. These three commonly used applications run in the embedded enterprise browser, locally rendered, fast, and responsive, so the experience feels native, and you do not incur any infrastructure costs of using a virtual desktop. When a desktop is required, you can easily launch a Windows 11 virtual desktop in the cloud. Here we open a 3D CAD application that takes advantage of a GPU-enabled desktop. We'll close the desktop session. It securely shuts down with one click. And finally, closing the Workspot client ends all browser and desktop sessions, returning us to a clean, secure state. That's a great little 60-second demo. We have this available to you. If you guys want a copy of that, we can send you a link of that to share among your peers. It just really highlights that story of optimizing your delivery by really taking advantage of Enterprise Browser and then using the desktop when you need it and only being charged then. So that's the idea, cost savings and user happiness. This first window that you see right here is all about disrupting that on-premises cost model. So it's something that you can't do on-prem. Now, you couldn't do this in the cloud before either, but now most of the clouds actually support suspend and resume. And so when you do that, it's kind of like hibernating your laptop. You can pull state down to the hard drive and then let all the resources go and stop paying for them until you need them again, and then restore state and then come back and then bang away on your desktop, maybe your GPU accelerated desktop. And with that, you pay for it just in time and just enough, saving all sorts of money. And as we said, with the enterprise browser, there's no infrastructure cost at all. You literally just have the Workspot client as a secured, policy-driven browser to deliver your web apps to your users. It's amazing. And all this comes together in one unified Workspot workspace. It's a client here that you can see. Each of the icons is going to launch you into, either virtual window applications or virtual Linux or Windows desktops or SaaS applications that might be public or private. It's all going to come out of the same single space here. Okay, so that makes it very nice and easy. Now let's break down those two pillars we've been talking about. How do we make the CFO happy and how do we make those users happy? Well, I got to tell you here, the CFOs are going to love the cost reduction that we had talked about already. And the end users are going to like several things that are coming up here as far as giving them an optimal experience, right? Better experience in the enterprise browser because it's running locally. And then, what's interesting is if you're only paying for the desktop that you need when you need it, you can actually give your users a higher performant desktop. maybe more CPU, virtual CPUs or memory, or maybe even a faster GPU, because they're only using it for a fraction of the day, maybe 2, 3, 4 hours, as opposed to just all month long. Now, because you're saving so much money, you can give them more power. They're happy with that. We also have monitoring tools that finds any anomalies anywhere and allows you to fix them fast to keep the users productive and on track. All right. Now let's look at that next layer. We talked about AI and machine learning driven, optimization here. And on the CFO side, we have that user forecasting that we're going to talk about in a minute to make sure that we're ready with a resource when someone uses it, but that it's not burning when they're not using it. So that's just in time provisioning. I need it now. Boom. Thank you. And just enough provisioning. There aren't a lot of VMs running when they're not being used, okay? Now, on the happy user side, we have this user sentiment analysis. Often enough, occasionally when the user closes the client, a little pop-up comes up and it says, how was your experience, 1 through 5? And there's even a box there. They can fill in some notes if they like. So with that user sentiment collected, baked into the product, you're going to find out, well, which users are happy, which users are not. Is it tied to a region, or is it tied to a particular application they're using, or a power user, or what? You're going to find that and correlate that. And anytime someone comes up with some grief, you'll find an instance in time and you'll see exactly what was going on anywhere and everywhere. And when you do, we're going to help you do root cause analysis with our AI machine learning capability. So what's going on under the covers? Well, you can see all the way on the left side, we've got observability from the client through to the gateway that connects you in back to your VM, and in that space, that's going to be the agent. The agent might be still running on-prem. We certainly support on-prem, but oftentimes it's going to be running in clouds, in many clouds, and in the cloud region in the closest proximity to the user to give them the best experience. But all of that, all the way through, is being monitored. Every 30 seconds, there's a sample taken everywhere. And where is that stored? It's stored in the cloud. We put it in our huge data lake in the cloud so that your IT folks can access it from anywhere, collaborate together, and make sure everything's running smoothly. And if it's not, they'll find out instantly with alarms, and you'll see those in a minute. Now, on that cost-saving side, you just got to take a look at this chart here. We got more data like this if you want this. But the first two rows that you see there are, non-persistent CPU and GPU. So it's non-persistent. That means when you're using it, CPU, 20 cents an hour, and maybe 75 cents an hour for a GPU accelerated desktop. That's crazy, right? Well, that's the case. And when it's non-persistent, when you're done, you just turn it off and off it goes, right? But the next two, you can see the third and fourth row, that's persistent CPU and GPU. So now we're talking about hibernation. We're talking about suspend, resume. Now this is 30 cents and 75 cents an hour, and then it's got an $8 an hour charge, $8 a month charge to hold state. That's just a little storage charge, right? So that when you come back and you want to restore that and resume that, it'll pull state off the hard drive and bam, you're right back where you're going. But the beauty is in both of those, when you're not using anything, you're not paying for those expensive resources. This changes the game entirely. Throw all your other financial math out. This changes everything. Our customers absolutely love this, okay? We also want to make sure you understand that if you're going into the cloud and you're not familiar with the cloud, we are there with you 100% of the way. We have tons of experience in this space, and our folks provide you hypercare service, right? You can see right here, 24/7, level 2, level 3. This is the opportunity. We work with you guys as technical account managers, and then getting into our DEX tools so you can see exactly what's going on. We can work with you shoulder to shoulder to make sure that this is all optimized, okay? Now, just a little glimpse into those DEX tools here, all right? So just-in-time provisioning, you can go into Workspot Control and set these controls up to monitor and take a look at exactly what you'd like, and to also set the sort of just-in-time provisioning to spin up VMs before they're needed, but not too many. You want to kind of dial that in, all right? And then real-time alarms. When a person actually stops using their VM and it's all shut down in the background to save you money, you want to make sure it's actually shut down. Every once in a while, an API call that fires up into a cloud doesn't actually execute all the way. Well, if it doesn't, there are these alarms here. These are COGS alarms. So this is cost of goods sold, COGS alarms. And it says pausing state not initiated for the desktop. Click, 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 right? And that means, oops, the API call was fired. This VM did not shut down. Here's an alarm. Go shut it down now and don't find out at the end of the day, of the week, or the month. All right. And then we have the capacity planning that we talked about. You can see here, these are the curves. You can see how much is being used every day of the week, 5 days and a weekend. You can see that flow. And then the red line there is excess capacity. So as you predicted and you've got your VM started ahead of time, how many of those things were actually running ahead? You can see right there, right? And we can take a look at this again from a trends perspective. So we can see a couple of different lines here. We got the active users as blue. We've got the historical forecast to see how that maps up. Like, how's our active? How does that map up against historical? And then what's our current forecast for next week based on this activity? These algorithms tune and tighten based on usage patterns in your organization. And so there's no better way to save money. And a visual representation of that is something like this. So this shows you the heat map. So you got 7 columns here, Sunday through Saturday. You can see Monday through Friday is kind of busy, and you get into the later hours of the day, kind of noon, through later in the day, and you can see the heat map. This is when your users are pulling VMs in the cloud and using those VMs. And the lighter areas, that's when they're not using them. So that's pretty cool because you won't be paying a thing during that time. And that's the beauty. Seeing the heat map and seeing the forecast curves and tightening that up and getting really good at that is optimizing your productivity and your usage of your cloud resources and minimizing your cost. Now, for that, let's go and hand things over to Bill and go ahead and see a live demonstration of the Citrix of the Workspot products here, and that will be taking a look at Workspot Control, Watch, and Trends. What do you think about that, Bill?
Sounds like a plan, Brad. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, let's hand things right over to you, and we can see your screen, and we'll go from there.
All right. So let's take a quick tour through Workspot. Workspot is composed of 3 core components. So it's Control and Watch and Trends, as Brad was talking about. So very, very quickly, we're going to go through Control. Control is really a place where it's a single pane of glass where you do all your configuration. You connect to your clouds. You establish gateways. You can configure your entire Workspot tenant, understand where your client software is being updated, your certificates, identity provider, authentication. Then we move over to resources. So this is really where the rubber hits the road. This is where our desktop pools and our application pools and even our global pools are configured and managed. You can see here we can actually update images, edit the image, edit the pool itself, and then redistribute to our users. We have a users area where we can pull users in from Entra ID or Active Directory. Also policies, where we can start applying policies to your user connections that pertain to security or protocols or the applications that you're delivering to your users. Then we go to reports. We're going to move over to Watch really quickly, and that was just a quick tour of Control. But as you notice, when we first enter Watch, what we see is we have a bird's eye view of the entire landscape of your property here. We have an understanding of the licenses, how many desktops are actually being used, how many app servers are being used, and what applications are being used. Who's active in the environment, but more importantly, where are your alarms coming from that might impact your users and your efficiency for your organization. So we can see here that we have critical alarms, and they're split up between their different categories, and also what's been resolved. If we look down below, we see that we have top event codes that have been happening within the past 24 hours. And Workspot Watch is a real-time observability tool. So this is actually what's happening today in the environment as we speak. So if I come over to users, for instance, and somebody has called into our help desk, maybe me, and I look up this user now, I can understand quite a bit about this user, where the user's coming from, what type of a client he's using, what the last session date is, what resources have been provided to this user, where the user connections, what day and time the user connections are coming from, what machines within this person's environment. But if we come down a little bit closer, we understand a little bit deeper about what's going on with this person. We understand what the client is, what the IP address is internally, also the client version, and are they coming from a wired event, or excuse me, a wired connection or a Wi-Fi connection? We understand what the Wi-Fi name is even. If we come down to gateway, we can understand what gateway and what region that user is coming through. So if that user was having an issue in connecting, we might have a red dot here on the gateway. And if that was the case, I could come to infrastructure and start looking for my US East 4, which is the connection for that user. Understand that it's in a ready state, but we may be having some challenges with this gateway, seeing that it hasn't been patched for 49 days. I can also come over to here and actually take proactive steps in order to install the appropriate patches for that gateway on demand. So this is Workspot Watch, and this is real time. So this is everything that's actually happening within the environment. If I look at this gateway, I can see everything that's going on with this gateway and the client in the environment. Now, if we move over, as we start talking about trending analysis and understanding where we can take advantage of these core tools within Workspot to get better efficiencies of scale and save money for your CTO and CFO, now we come into trends. Immediately, what I see is a sentiment statement here. So the sentiment, based on what Brad was talking about, we provide a survey, and you can configure the survey to basically pop up for your users at the end of a session on a certain interval, right? So now I see the sentiment for my company in general. But if I come over to desktop pools and I do the same thing and look at sentiment here, now I get a much clearer understanding as to what day of the month and where my sentiment is for my different users, or excuse me, my different pools. So I can understand that, for instance, on this day, the sentiment was very low. So I can start going back into the trend data and that analysis and see potentially what was happening within this environment and this day. If I look at usage and we start looking at unique users, we can understand where our environment is being utilized the most and where we may need to actually expand usage and expand resources for that machine. Now, when we come to sizing, this to me is very interesting. I can look at undersized and oversized machines within this view. And when I start looking at undersized machines, the first thing that comes to mind is, are my users struggling? Are those machines struggling to keep up with my users? So where is the productivity for this environment? And are my users, is this where some of the lacking sentiment comes from? Might I come through and actually find these users and these desktop pools and potentially add some resources to these pools to make my users a little more productive within the environment? So that's one way of cost savings, in the sense of, let's make our users more productive. But if I come over to oversized desktops, now I start understanding, now I have 1,000 desktops within my environment that, based on the criteria, they're oversized. They're not being taxed enough. So what I may do is come through this desktop pool and understand where those oversized machines are, and maybe slim down that type of VM that I'm offering to those users, because when that machine is being used, we're paying for all of the machine, regardless of whether the user is using all of the machine. So if I can back down some of that hardware that I'm actually using within my cloud provider, now I have an ability to reduce the amount of money that we're costing the company to run these machines. So if I come to now user heat map, Brad showed a little bit of the heat map, and we're going to show a little bit more. But what we see first here is excess machines versus used machines. So if I start understanding any of these graphs here, I can see what's in use, what's excess and just running for no reason, quite honestly, and what's paused within the environment. I can scale this down to get a more of a bird's eye view per day here, and understand throughout the day what's happening within this environment from an excess perspective. And if I slowly come down here to usage heat map, I start understanding how many machines are actually being used within the environment at different times of the day. So as Brad was talking about applying the policies for just enough and just in time, now I have the ability and the trending analysis to be able to see where my users are actually coming in, or maybe not where, but when my users are coming into the environment. So that's a great understanding. But also, if I come a little bit further down here, I can see excess. So the same type of a heat map, but now I can start looking at this heat map at the top for usage, and then I look at excess heat map for what's actually being run in the environment but not being used. So now I can start applying those policies appropriately and start spinning those machines down, or quite honestly, just not spinning them up at those times, and have less excess within the environment until we get down in here into the deeper red and the more used environment within the environment. So I can use all of this environment analytical data to understand what I need to do to provide just enough resource at just the right time for my users. So I'm providing a stellar computing environment and cloud environment for my users. However, I'm also not costing my company a ton of money from a cloud perspective.
I think that's a great job of that live demo there. Thank you, Bill. That's a beautiful thing. Thank you. And I want to encourage the folks, if you have any questions, to go ahead and get in that question box, and we'll take those live as we go also, okay? So let's go ahead and wrap up here. I just want to let you guys know about some tools that we have that are available in addition to everything that you saw. If you go to calc.workspot.com, we have an Azure, AWS, and GCP IaaS calculator. So what is that infrastructure cost going to be? You can kind of plug in your numbers for the number of users that you want, the regions and so forth, the size of the machines, and you can kind of get a ballpark figure of what that's going to cost. Now, we can help you with this directly. You don't have to do it yourself, but just wanted to let you know you can tinker around in there and get kind of a feel for those costs if you're moving from on-prem into cloud, or even if you're in the cloud already. We might have some math for you that's very interesting. And then a reminder, as you can see, the goworkspot.com DaaS costs, myth versus reality, those per hour charges you can see down below, whether it's non-persistent or persistent, and whether it's CPU or GPU configured workstations and desktops, you're all set right there, okay? So, hey, with that, I just want to go ahead and close things out and say thank you to all of you that have attended today. We really appreciate your time. Looks like we're right on schedule. I would like to thank you, Brad Peterson, Field CTO from California, and Bill, thank you.
Thanks very much, Brad.
Beautiful. All right, everyone, take care. Have a beautiful rest of your day and the rest of your week. We'll all talk soon. Take care.
Take care
Bye-bye.
now.